So as we continue to explore the conversation around energy and development, especially as we battle poverty in a country like Ghana, I'm honored to speak to Tisha. Tisha Schuller is from Colorado Gas, and she's been sharing her views at the IEA as we've explored this topic. And Tisha, it's good to see you. Thanks for making the time.
My pleasure.
You said something quite interesting. You highlighted 4 myths, if you like, that tend to recur in the conversations around energy sources, especially for developing economies like ours. I think perhaps I'd love to hear you go over those 4 myths really quickly.
Sure.
And their implication on our sector.
Sure. The starting point is that these are myths occurring in developed economies, rich economies, by very well-meaning, well-intentioned, very intelligent people who want to help alleviate poverty. But they have 4 myths that are getting in the way of the advancement I think we need to make. So the first one is that residential access equals energy access. So you get energy to homes instead of you get energy to build industry and economies and create jobs, which is a really important building block to move an economy out of poverty. The second one is that developing economies will leapfrog the need for fossil fuels and they'll leapfrog the need for industrialization, creating manufacturing jobs. No economy in the world has ever done that. But there are many well-meaning people who imagine that a society will instantly go to a service economy, that they'll have cell phones and data centers and self-driving cars. But they haven't thought about all of those things have to be manufactured, and industrialization is where we build the economy and create jobs. The third one is that climate change needs to be the most important priority because it is the developing economies that will be most negatively impacted by climate change.
That's a myth.
Well, it is true, except for the fact that an emerging economy, if it will be impacted by climate change, what does it need to be prepared? It needs a high-functioning economy. Residents need money. The government needs the ability to create infrastructure, to respond with new agricultural solutions, to build sea walls, or maybe even to move displaced peoples. So the idea of prioritizing things that limit the economic development of a country is ultimately not going to help that country prepare for climate change. And then the fourth myth is that technology is farther than it is. So again, well-meaning, very smart people believe that new economies can develop on wind and solar alone. And that is simply not true because there's many building blocks of an economy that are required beyond power, and there's power required beyond what you can get at scale from wind and solar.
Okay, now, I mean, the third one, the one I asked is that a myth? The thing that occurs to me is that what you're actually saying is, yes, climate change will be a problem in time, but we need to do more of the things that cause climate change in order to prepare us for climate change. That's essentially the point you're making.
It is. So this is a conclusion I have come to personally. I think it takes a matter of some soul searching. The developed rich world has spent 200 years developing using fossil fuels and creating the carbon crisis that we're in today. I think it's unconscionable to ask emerging economies who want to raise their people out of poverty to say, we created a crisis, now you need to help us solve it. And by the way, it's going to slow down your development. It's the soul searching that I've undergone has led me to the conclusion that yes, indeed, as a global family, the emerging developing economies should prioritize their economic development. And if there's a burden to be paid, if someone should be reducing their carbon emissions, it's the rich economies. And I don't believe that with the technology we have today, that a country like Ghana can continue to develop in the absence of oil, natural gas, and coal, and nuclear for that matter. And so this is a matter of where you prioritize what you think should happen. I would prefer there was zero carbon, But in the order of my priorities, creating healthy, thriving economies where the people, the families, the communities are resilient to future climate change, I think then we've done our shared job as a global community for the future.
Right. I suppose you do make a point in terms of scale. The developed world is causing so much more damage to the climate than the developing world. In fact, the difference is so large that if the developing countries did nothing to reduce their carbon emissions, it would probably have a very insignificant effect on the climate as a whole. So if anybody should change, it's the big guys,
Yes.
and we should simply be allowed to prepare for the damage they've caused.
I think that's a fair summary. There are very large emerging economies in India, in China, that will have a very significant effect on the ultimate carbon budget. That said, I still think it should be global prosperity that can be our shared priority over stop emissions, and we'll hope that you are well prepared for what's going to come. Instead, I think that every country should be empowered to raise its people out of poverty and prepare itself for resiliency. That's, I think, our shared human obligation.
Now, we've talked a lot today about gas here in Ghana, and those 5 trillion lovely cubic feet of it under our sea. But it's not easy to bring it out and use it efficiently. It costs a lot of money. And even after we fix all the infrastructural problems that we need to fix in order to get it out here, we then need a customer. And that is not an easy proposition either. Because of this, we've heard suggestions of alternatives to natural gas. Is that really the point here? That, well, yes, we've got natural gas, but it just might not be as good a thing as we think. We ought to spend more time on coal and
So I think the opportunity for Ghana is to look at the range of options there's a range of energy needs, and then there's a range of energy alternatives. And they each, the energy mix, and they each have trade-offs, benefits, and downsides. Investing in natural gas infrastructure will have some benefits as long as you are able to secure a long-term supply of natural gas, which really means ultimately you're able to import natural gas if the domestic supply wanes. Now, there's more reason for gas than just power, because gas provides feedstock for petrochemicals into plastics, for fertilizer, very important in a growing economy, for direct heat for manufacturing. So there are reasons to build natural gas for the future, of which power is just one piece. That said, I think it is a in-country decision to look at what the best mix is. And for example, for baseload power, nuclear might be the solution that makes the most sense. What's important to me is that an emerging economy is allowed to make the right choice. And if a rich world organization wants to limit those choices, that they support paying the difference. So maybe a coal-fired power plant makes the most economic sense. In Ghana, if an international agency doesn't want that plant built, then they should make sure that there are the resources to build nuclear, not just say no. And I think that's our shared obligation if we want to place climate as a top priority.
Now, I want to bring up another myth when it comes to energy, especially in our part of the world. And I'm still shocked that it's a myth, but it seems to be that solar power is a low-hanging fruit. It really isn't, is it?
Well, solar is a wonderful resource in certain uses. So this comes back to the energy mix. Now, people like to say the sun is free, but in reality, building solar is not free. Someone has to mine it, manufacture and build it. Again, here we are at manufacturing, industrialization. So you have to create the solar, and then you have to maintain them, which is actually an important component where a lot of solar fails. Where can solar be successful? mini grids that might not have any other source because they're rural. So a small community could have a shared mini grid. Distributed generation on houses in rural environments. Where solar is probably not going to make sense is a massive solar farm to support a city. Because even if you have that, there's not a way to store it that's affordable. So ultimately, you're going to need natural gas to be functional at night. Most of the demand for power comes at night. And so therefore, you're going to need equal capacity gas and solar. That doesn't really make sense for a city.
So let's look to the future, and you've pointed out how the conversation really ought to go between the developed world and the developing world when it comes to our energy mix. How can the developing world position itself better when it comes to agreements, negotiations, and so forth, so that we make decisions that are more beneficial to us than these big powers that come along wanting to help? Don't often achieve that.
I think there's two components. The first is that it is acceptable, and I would say encouraged, that developing economies know that the rich countries or the Western countries, they don't know the true story. Those myths are so pervasive that it's actually really important for a country to tell its story. So that's one component, and then the collection of many emerging economies, those voices coming together to say, these are our shared priorities, and these are the obligations of the West, if you want to, or the rich countries, if you want to influence our future energy mix. I think you can't tell those in-country stories enough. They would be really surprising to a lot of people. The second thing is that I agree with a lot of the things I learned today, which is that a country like Ghana needs to keep the power dynamic on its own side in commercial negotiations. And so that will mean bringing together the many smart resources of the different ministries, the opportunity to use consultants with expertise in power, in oil and gas, in transmission, bringing those resources together to negotiate on equal terms with the willingness to walk away. I think those are important dynamics to shift the way the historic conversations have gone and change. I think the balance of power should be in favor of the emerging economies.
I wonder how we will practicalize this, because we're going to be having these conversations with countries that produce Exxon, Shell, Acker, it's very difficult to tell these people that we're the experts and you're not. In a negotiation, I wonder how we're going to position ourselves to get our message heard by people who feel we've been doing this longer than we've had oil.
I think that's a fair concern, and it's a concern that no individual, including me, is sophisticated or experienced enough to answer. But what I heard today was an interest and a willingness to bring the disparate parts that know the finance and contract negotiations, that know the oil and gas resources, that know the other contracts that have been successfully carried out from other countries. Those resources coming together, along with external supporters, consultants, agencies, to collectively share knowledge and change the nature of those negotiations. I don't have any illusions that would be easy, but I think it can be a shared objective. And I think, again, it's also incumbent upon the agencies that represent rich countries to support emerging economies in their private sector negotiations. It's unconscionable that certain agencies discourage the development of fossil fuels and then sit beside idly while the same country is negotiating with a more knowledgeable or powerful foreign company, private company. So from my perspective, that is something that we bear a collective responsibility to right that wrong.
Tisha, this has been enlightening. Thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.